So there's been a lot of discussion recently about people having their Vinted accounts banned, and you may have noticed that this story has even been picked up by the BBC News. So I actually noticed a video pop up on YouTube about a report all about Vinted and about how a lot of people were getting their accounts banned and the kind of things that they were getting their accounts banned for. Obviously, we've mentioned this in quite a few videos. I know other people have been talking about it. It's all over Facebook, Reddit, everybody's experiences have been everywhere. So it's really interesting that it's actually been picked up by, the BBC, by a news report. And the main thing that they were kind of speaking about was how people were obviously getting their Vinted accounts banned unfairly, and a lot of chat about Vinted using AI. So within this news report, there was also this website that was brought to my attention called Sad Vinted Faces. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that is what it's called. And it's actually like a community run website. It's not obviously officially linked with Vinted, but it's somewhere that you can actually go to share your experience, get some help as well. And there's a lot of really helpful stuff on there, such as things like the types of keywords that could get you banned, the types of brands that can also potentially get you banned, and obviously just people sharing their experiences. And also there's also support there as well on if you have gotten your account restricted or banned, how you can actually get it back. So hi, if you're new here, my name is Gemma, and me and my fiance James run a business where we sell vintage and luxury items online, and we like to share all the different things that we're learning along the way, as well as different things that we are trying out. So if you think that would be interesting to you or useful, consider subscribing. First of all, I wanted to talk about some of the things that people are getting their account either restricted or banned for. And if you do have a little look at this Sad Vinted Faces website, I keep on wanting to call it Vinted Sad Faces, but it's Sad Vinted Faces. And I'll leave it linked below because it is very helpful. So the types of things that people are being banned for include supposed fraudulent activity. And I'm doing this because in the messages that people are sharing, it can be it's almost like Vinted just list a bunch of things that they might be doing, such as obviously listing fake items, spamming, but it just says fraudulent activity. It doesn't, in the messages that these people are sharing, it doesn't specifically say what they're doing, which is obviously very frustrating from their end. Things like listing multiple items, listing handmade items, listing restricted items, and then even doing things that Vinted would class as spammy, such as maybe listing too many items all in one go, or too closely together, and also buying too many items too closely together as well. So after having a little look through the Sad Vinted Faces website, I've just got it up here, there's a few things that a lot of people are being restricted or banned for, and it's things like listing large volumes of items, which I kind of mentioned, a lot of new with tags items. So we have mentioned this before, how if you list too many, but again Vinted doesn't clearly say how many is too many new with tags items, this can be classed as what they would think is commercial selling, which you're not really meant to do on Vinted. Listing too many things that are too similar, so almost like it's duplicate listings, they might think. Too professional looking photos. So pretty sure I did see an example on this website where, and this was a quote from a Vinted member of support staff saying that their photos were too professional looking, so it made it come across that they were a commercial seller, and they got restricted or banned for that. Relisting, and it even says sales spikes. So if an account has an all of a sudden spike in sales, this can also flag your account to Vinted. However, I suppose it is important to know that this is obviously just people's experiences. These are not, things that are coming from Vinted's rules themselves. But obviously, if lots of people are experiencing this, then there is a bit of a pattern there, and there is obviously something going on with Vinted that is flagging all these things. Next, I thought we could have a little look at the brands that could potentially get you banned. Now, it's a very, just to be clear, this is people's experiences. Again, this is not a list that is being given by Vinted. Vinted are not saying if you list this brand, I'm not saying if you list this brand, you're going to get banned. But this is just using the evidence that this website has. They do have like a little kind of chart that shows people's experiences, how many people have been banned for using these or for listing these brands. So I'll just kind of share what it says here. So the very top one, we've got Nike. So people using, listing things, a lot of Nike things, vintage. So obviously that's not a brand, that's just like I would say a keyword. And I mean, we do use the word vintage in our listings. Adidas, Shein, Next, Primark, M&S, UGG, H&M, Zara, Coach. Again, we list a lot of Coach. North Face, Boden, Apple, ASOS, Ralph Lauren, Levi's, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and Disney. So these are the kind of top 20, I think it's 20 there. Yeah, the chart shows top 20 brands that have got people saying that they've been banned for using these brands because they thought they were counterfeit. And the thing that I find most interesting here, if you notice, is that it's not luxury brands that are mainly in that list there. Obviously there is Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Ralph Lauren, which is kind of mid-tier luxury, I suppose. But yeah, a lot of it is high street brands. So it's not really brands that people are really going to probably fake. I don't know if you can get, I know you can get fake Adidas and Nike and things, but some of these like Shein and Primark, I don't even know if that's even a thing. So very interesting that it's a mixture, and there is actually mainly high street brands, and this is also something that this website does point out. And they've actually said here that it's a strong signal that the automated moderation that Vinted use is misfiring across the price range, not just on genuine luxury items. So yeah, it just kind of like supports the fact that they probably are not using humans to check about these supposedly counterfeit items, that it is just being an AI or a bot sort of system. I also wanted to point out as well is that a lot of these experiences of where people are being flagged for using these brands, obviously I just want to make it clear, they are saying that they're not fake brands, that these people are actually selling genuine items with these brands, and they're still getting flagged for selling fake or counterfeit items. So obviously this is just what they're saying. We don't know how true that is, but I mean, we've been flagged for supposedly selling counterfeit items when we've even actually produced like the packaging, proof of purchase and all that kind of stuff, and it still doesn't, they still don't accept it as being real. The next topic I wanted to go through was particular words or phrases that could get you flagged on Vinted. And again, they do have a list on this sad Vinted Faces website. So some of these I do know are actually part of Vinted's rules. So I know that if you say obviously in the listing that something is fake, you are going to get flagged. That's just, I'm hoping that's quite obvious. However, there are other items where, other phrases and things that are being flagged that again, Vinted isn't being super clear about. And I do feel that people could accidentally use these, not realising that it's maybe, against Vinted rules. Again, just to be clear, this is from people's experiences. Again, not an actual list that has come from Vinted about banned, or should I say, not banned, but words that can get you flagged and things. So the word type, as in if you use the phrase like Chanel type bag, that could get you flagged, because obviously it could be, implying that it's a fake or a dupe. For some reason, XS, so the two letters XS, to me that would mean extra small. So somebody said that they added it to a soft toy description in response to a buyer question about size. They said XS, and they got flagged for it being fraudulent. So I don't know what that is, because to me that's a size. So that one's a little bit confusing. Also the words like, inspired and style. So again, you might say a Chanel style bag, a Chanel like bag, or a Chanel inspired bag. Again, I suppose it could give the impression that it's a fake. And then here, again, Chanel inspired. And then for some reason, editing a description at all. Now, personally, I've went in and done this, like when I've had to go in and maybe adapt to the description to add in like measurements and things like that. So I've never had that happen to me. However, a few people have said that they went in and corrected a typo or something to their description and have been flagged for that. So I'm not totally sure what all that's about, but that's just something else to be aware of. And then just to kind of say what this sad Vinted Faces were saying about the words and phrases, they've sort of mentioned that Vinted's AI moderation scans titles and descriptions and photos for signals that the listing could be a commercial listing, counterfeit, prohibited, because obviously there's items that are just not allowed even if they're not fakes, or fraudulent, and it gets it wrong constantly. So, and it obviously it goes through all the lists of the words, phrases, and then obviously the brands that we've also mentioned that could trigger listing removals or permanent bans. Says every entry is drawn from real UK seller stories that's been submitted to this website. So this is all like real life examples. So yeah, it's just a little bit, obviously I do understand the whole thing about maybe not using the word like, inspired by, type, or even dupe, that kind of thing, and definitely not the word fake, because it will imply that, you know, it is a fake item. So that, yeah, that is something that I would hope would help people not get their items or their accounts banned or restricted as often. Next, I kind of want to talk about some item types. So we all know that Vinted do have a list of items that you're not allowed to sell, including things like opened makeup, perfume items, obviously dangerous items like weapons and things like that, uniforms, and this has actually come up quite a few times recently, people trying to sell like work uniforms. So even if it is, you know, you're obviously, to me that's really helpful, but they don't allow that either. So, you know, there is things that are just not allowed. So here are a few other things that might not have been super obvious. So again, this is from people's real life experiences. Cocktail spoons, because they've been triggered as being dangerous items. Dolce Gusto coffee pods, because they are flagged as food and beverages, which technically they are, but I suppose they're sealed, so that's a little bit frustrating. Handmade autism flashcards, that's probably because of the handmade thing. Empty vintage perfume bottle, because it's classed as used toiletries, so even though it's just the bottle and it might be like a decorative home piece, it's classed as a used toiletry. Miniature perfume, even though it was sealed and never used, because it was not new. I actually think with the miniature perfumes, I don't know if people knew about this, but if you get anything, if you try to sell something that maybe would normally be used as like promotional items, so perfume samples, they might think this about miniature perfumes, even though you've bought them, they might think it's more of a promotional thing. Or if you say get free gifts from a brand, like sometimes when you buy something you might get like a free keyring or a free magnet or like a free like little toiletry bag or something, those kind of items are also prohibited, which I didn't know about. Socks, for some reason, press on nails from mystery boxes. So for this one again, after looking into things that we weren't allowed, and I do actually have a video here where I do go through in a little bit more detail about items that you're not allowed to sell, and mystery boxes is a big one. So, you know, if they've maybe mentioned mystery box in their title, I can see why that one's been banned, even though the item isn't itself a mystery box. You can see what it is because they've used that phrase potentially. That would be why they've been banned. Books, which is unusual, and then a photo frame, which was flagged as a counterfeit item. Don't know how you can fake a photo frame, but oh well. But yeah, but going back to the mystery box thing, so that is something to keep in mind if you are someone who sells even Pokemon cards and stuff, because technically an unopened pack of Pokemon cards is classed as a mystery box. That could also get you flagged, which obviously again is really frustrating. So this website, Sad Vintage Faces, also talks through about few examples of people being scammed, and kind of like it does give you a little bit of advice. I'm pretty sure it does. Let's kind of go on what to actually do. So, you know, there's a few people here talking about how buyers who've been scammed, who've paid for items, the items never arrived or something else has arrived. So looking into a few examples of different kind of experiences with scams and things, obviously there's a lot of buyers who are, you know, experiencing being sent like a fake item, and I think quite a few people, it's you know, that when you do receive an item from Vinted, you do get, I think it's 2 to 3 days to kind of look at the item, make sure you're happy with it, and then either click yes, everything's okay, or it does it automatically. So a few people kind of experiencing the situation where they've maybe been on holiday when the item has been delivered, so they've not been there to actually check the item themselves. When they've come home, they've checked it and they've figured out it's fake. And obviously then there's nothing they can do about it. The other situation that I've got here is this person initially, after looking at the item, they thought it was real, and then only after using it and then looking at it a bit more closely, they figured out it was fake. And then again, obviously because they've clicked everything's okay, they've not been able to do anything about it. So I feel a little bit sort of, I don't know, like in two minds here, because I do feel like how long, you know what I mean, can you leave after can you leave it for an item to have been delivered, everything's classed as okay? Because obviously for a seller, it can be quite frustrating if, say, 3 months down the line, a seller then a buyer turned around and says, oh, I want a return for this reason. You can't really keep it going on forever. However, it is unfair if you don't realise, or you don't realise until you've used it, or you're away on holiday. And I think that maybe just sort of highlights, as a buyer, maybe make sure, for one thing, that you're able to check the item, and that when you do check the item, really thoroughly check it, like check it properly, and if there is anything at all that you're unsure about, flag it up as soon as possible. Another thing that seems to be happening quite a lot as well is mixes up with parcels. So people, and this is from the buyer and the seller side of things, so we've had buyers receiving a completely different item in the post, you know, not the item they've ordered at all, and then when they've contacted the seller, you know, the seller's obviously saying that's not what I sent. And I do think there is sometimes where it is a scam. The seller has, you know, that's a dodgy seller. The seller has just sent an empty parcel or something completely different. However, there has been instances where the parcels have genuinely gotten mixed up. And then obviously a lot of people are saying that Vinted are just not very much help in actually investigating this. And I suppose it can be a little bit confusing, because once that parcel has been sent, it's really, I think, the delivery company that kind of has to deal with it, or has to look into it. I have to say that any time that I've dealt with InPost and there's been an issue with InPost, they have been really good and they have been quite quick. But it can be very confusing who you contact. Is it Vinted? Is it the delivery company? At what point do you contact the delivery company? Because I'm pretty sure there's been times in the past where something's taken a little while or it's got lost, and we've contacted the delivery company, and then they've then reverted us back to Vinted. So again, just a little bit of clarity on the rules on this would be really helpful. And obviously a lot of customers are reporting that when they are reporting issues, it's an AI response they're getting, and it's all automated responses, it's a bot, and you know, they're sort of being suggested to do things that they've already done, and it's just kind of wasting their time. And then another thing that I've actually read quite a few times happening is that people have purchased luxury or branded items from Vinted. So these items were obviously fine to be sold through Vinted, and then they've gotten them and then maybe tried to then sell them on themselves, and they've been flagged as fake. So this particular example here that I'm just reading, their partner bought a pair of Gucci trainers on Vinted 2 years ago, got them verified through Vinted's own authentication, so that's even worse, authentication service. They came back that they were real, they were all fine and everything, had the receipt, you know, everything was all verified through Vinted, totally fine. Then the person then decided to sell them on themselves on Vinted, and they got flagged on Vinted as being fake, even though previously they'd been sold on Vinted and also verified by Vinted. And even though this person, you know, put all the information on their listing, they were still being flagged as fake. And it says there that their account was actually blocked by Vinted's AI system. So not just that their listing was taken down, their account was even blocked. Then go on to say that it took them 3 weeks of chasing to actually get a human to, well, what they think was a human, to actually look into it. They now say they have reason to believe that they uploaded a counterfeit item. They're sticking by their sort of decision on that, and have now permanently blocked this person's account. I'm just reading on now, and it says that this person, because of their account being blocked, obviously before it got permanently banned, they said they had outstanding orders which were all cancelled because of the Gucci ones. They says they were hit then with 11 negative automatic reviews because of that. So not the actual customers leaving the reviews. You get an automatic review if you cancel an item, and their wallet balance got frozen as well, so they couldn't even withdraw the money for the items that they'd already sold. And then they kind of finish off saying it's actually really worrying how much power these AI systems have over people's accounts and income. It's the money side of it that really gets me, especially if you've sent off an item, if it's been received, and especially if it's been received and the customer, has approved it and said everything's okay. They should not, is that not just stealing? Like, when you think about it? I understand if it's an item that maybe there has been suspended, like the actual item that's in question, if there has been something and maybe the item is maybe being suspected as being fake or is significantly not as described or whatever, right? I understand those items, you not getting the money for those items yet. However, if it's items that have been sold and they've been approved by the seller and they're, everything's been clicked as okay, they should not be, suspending your money, because that to me is stealing. Like, that is, you've sold an item, everything's been legit and fine, and they're just not giving you your money. I think, that's actually, surely there's some rule against that. So after looking at this Sad Vintage Faces website, I just kind of wanted to throw in a few percentages here. So this has been out of a survey that they've obviously done, and this is a few percentages which are actually quite shocking. So 59.4% people, it says here, have been banned at any point. So that has been out of nearly 2,000 people who've taken this survey. 32.6%, so nearly a third, have been banned permanently. So that means never getting their account back, not just restricted, they've been banned permanently. 40.4% have lost money. So that's, you're getting close to 50% here. People who've taken this survey have actually lost some sort of money. And then 64.4% have been ignored by customer service. So again, backing up the fact that maybe Vinted are relying way too heavily on AI. And then when it comes to the lost money, there's actually numbers here of like what sort of brackets of the amounts of money. So under £10, 69 people lost that. But the biggest bracket is between £10 and £50. And then the next biggest bracket is £50 to £100. And that's been a couple of hundred people out of this survey that have lost that amount of money. So it's not, just a few pound we're talking about here. We're talking about decent amounts of money, which is actually really, really worrying. And then there's even people who have lost between £100 and £500 and then £500 plus. They're not the biggest brackets, but they're not the smallest brackets either. They kind of land in the middle. 98 people have lost £100 to £500, and then 61 people have lost 500 plus. So it makes you think, where's that money gone? Like, obviously I do know that potentially some of it could be being refunded to the customer, if the customer or even the seller, if there's been a scam going on. But if it's been people having their account restricted and then not being able to take the money out of their wallet, where is that money going? That must be going to Vinted. Like, surely that it doesn't just disappear. And it makes you think, where is that money going? Especially if it's hundreds of pounds. Like, who has that money? And I suppose it just kind of goes on to the main question, whereas, is Vinted relying way too heavily on AI? And I think, from these experiences and from this BBC report that I was talking about, I think the answer is probably a definite yes. Like, I know for us, whenever we've kind of contacted Vinted support, the first few messages we get are definitely from AI, or definitely from bots, or not from real people. And a lot of the time, whatever we're asking, they're not really answering it properly. It's not really what we're talking about. It's not really what we're asking. And it takes so long for the messages to get through to a real person as well. Like, that person said 3 weeks. Yeah, that's about right. Like, things that we've had to deal with in the past, it's taken minimum 2, maybe 3 weeks before we'll actually get a response from what we think is a real person. If you do go ahead and watch that Vinted report, the BBC report that I mentioned, the person who runs the website talks a lot about AI and about how, there's so many innocent sellers, and I think buyers as well, who are being, affected by the lack of humans that are actually looking at things. And obviously the sad thing is that this is people's businesses, this is people's, not just a hobby, this is part of their income. And it's not just people that are trying to clear out wardrobes, it's people that do actually have pro seller accounts as well. So it is a genuine, they are actually making money, and it's part of their business. And I suppose it just kind of highlights the point as well of that maybe, putting your entire business on one platform is not a good idea, because you don't know when something like this might happen to your account. So I would definitely suggest, if you do have a Vinted account, to have also an eBay account, even if it's just something that kind of ticks along in the background, to have Depop if you are able to have your own website, and have some sort of way of contacting or even just passing on your details to your customers. So for us, what we do is we do put in like little business cards to our packages with our website, with our email address and things like that, just so that people can return, be a return customer to us. They don't have to go and find us on Vinted. They can come to our website. And obviously they might not, but it's least it's that, you know, they do have some sort of contact that isn't reliant on Vinted. And obviously, you know, the use of AI in some ways, Vinted probably do need to do something to make things on their website, you know, to make things a bit more automated, because I do feel like Vinted has grown quite big quite quickly, almost to the point of where they maybe are struggling to manage things like scams and counterfeit items and items that are kind of maybe going against their rules, and maybe this is just their way of managing how many people are now using it. And obviously we have seen that they've expanded to the US as well as Australia, and it does make you think though, are they actually capable of expanding to these places if they can't manage what they've already got in the UK, and I think in Europe as well? If they're not able to provide good customer service to the people they've already got, if they can't keep an eye on what items are being listed to make sure they're not counterfeit, they're not going against the rules, and you know that sellers and buyers aren't breaking the rules, if they can't manage that with their UK market and with the European market, because I think that's kind of where they kind of started off with, then why are they expanding to the US and Australia? Because they obviously, you know, I'm not saying they're struggling, but you know, there's obviously a reason that they're having to use these automated systems so heavily. And obviously we don't want Vinted to turn into another Etsy where you've got lots of people selling low value items, lots of drop shipped items, and then obviously lots of fakes and things like that. However, there are so many innocent users that are being caught up in this and that are actually losing their businesses, their money, and their items as well. And then I think, which is probably the thing that's most frustrating, is that Vinted itself isn't super clear on a lot of the rules. Like obviously we do know they have a list of things that you're not allowed to sell, and there are a list of, you know, what there is a bit of a description of what they class as commercial selling. However, when it comes to certain phrases and things like that, or should I say certain things that they might class as fraudulent activity, that seems to be the area the fraudulent activity seems to be almost the blanket phrase that they put onto a lot of these issues that I've been seeing. So, you know, it's not very clear. They just say fraudulent activity, and then you're thinking, right, okay, is it the photographs? Is it description? Is it the brand name? Is it the actual item itself? Like, what is it? Is it the action, you know, people's actions maybe within messages? Like, they're not being very clear. They just kind of slap this fraudulent activity label on quite a lot of these issues that I've been seeing. And I think they do need to be a lot clearer when it comes to their rules, so that all these people are not then getting their accounts banned and restricted. So let me know in the comments below, have you experienced any restrictions or bans or items taken down, especially if they haven't been very clear on what you've done wrong? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear more of these stories, because I think the more that we can kind of figure out what the patterns are, maybe we can kind of avoid doing these things and then maybe not get restricted or banned. So if you found this video useful or interesting, make sure and subscribe and turn the notification bell for my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.